Så er det blevet fredag. Jeg ved ikke, om jeg i går fik sagt, at det var mandag, men nej, torsdag. Men nu er det i hvert fald blevet fredag. Jeg har sovet ude på hostlet i nat, ude på vandrehjemmet, ude lidt uden for det hele. Og Toga har sovet hos sin ven Anton. I dag mener jeg, at vi skal på Shakespeare Bookstore, og der bliver noget George Shapiro eller noget. Jeg skal mødes med Toge klokken 2 ude hos hans ven. Og jeg har ikke fået nogen aftale personligt igennem til, om jeg også kan sove der, men det håber jeg selvfølgelig på, at jeg kan. Fordi det vil da løse et af de problemer, vi har, både med penge og alting. Og jeg regner frem, at jeg skal hjem den 11. Der er 6 dage nu eller sådan noget. Så det hele skal jo slå til. Ellers bliver vi sindssygt på røven, altså. Men ja. Nu vil jeg gå og få en øl. Og måske gå ind og købe en bog. Fordi bøger er man nødt til at købe. Så det gør jeg. Nu er jeg kommet til Simplon, og jeg venter på Toge, som skulle møde mig her på metrostationen. Jeg sidder lige og får en øl, og han er ikke dukket op endnu, men det gør han vel nok. Før eller siden. Så skal vi lave nogle planer for i dag, og i dag skal vi have noget jazz og noget George Shapiro, så det bliver godt. Jeg er rolig, det skal nok blive et godt program i dag. Nu er det godt. Jeg har mødt Toge, og vi er kommet hjem til Anton. Og det bedste af det hele, det er, at jeg kan også få lov til at sove her, til jeg skal hjem igen. Så nu er boligsituationen løst. Vi bor her frem til den 11. Toge bliver lidt længere. Jeg skal lige filme her, fordi det er Antons hjem. Se, der sidder de nok så pariser. Se, Anton i vinduet. Jeg skal lige her. Er det pariser eller hvad? Er det rigtigt, vi skal bo her?
Ja, den er god nok.
Er den god nok? Ej. Og Toge, du kommer og hentede mig på metrostationen.
Ja, jeg fandt dig.
Du fandt mig, så jeg ikke er låst. Ej, hvor dejligt.
Nu prøver jeg at beslutte mig for, hvad vi skal høre de næste par dage.
Okay. Vi vil lave programmer, eller hvad?
Ja, fordi vi skal maile til Sunside og forespørge efter nogle ting, de har her. Så jeg synes, vi skal beslutte os for, hvad vi skal høre. Jeg vil gerne høre Heath Brothers.
Ja, det kunne være fedt.
Så er de også en Bill Evans tribute.
Ej, det skal vi også høre.
Jamen, vi har jo altid kørt hårdt på det der med tributes.
Ja, det er vi gode til.
Så det synes jeg, det er... Hvad fanden hedder det? Det er i morgen. I morgen må det være. Er det den 6. i dag?
Ja.
Så det er den 7. Der er det den der tribute. Og så den 8. 9. Der spiller Heath Brothers 3 gange i alt. Spiller 2 sæt den 9.
Så skulle vi nok kunne nå det.
Tror du ikke det?
Det tror jeg.
Jeg tror, jeg skriver til ham, at det er de 2 ting, vi gerne vil. Men der er andet, du kan måske også lige kigge.
Jeg kigger også lige.
Okay. Super.
Vi er på vej ind til Saint-Michel, hvor vi skal på Shakespeare Bookstore, fordi at Shapiro han læser op fra sin bog om Shakespeare i dag. Ja. Og vi har lavet en aftale om at få lov til at filme det, så det har vi tænkt os at gøre.
Det er sandt. Og det er vist mig, der skal filme af en eller anden grund.
Jamen, jeg er lidt nede med det. Jeg har haft en dårlig morgen og sådan noget, og jeg har sovet på hostel i nat, så jeg er ikke helt op på beatet. Så Toge filmer i dag.
Jeg har jo sovet hos Anton, så jeg har det fint.
Ja, Toge har sovet hos Anton.
Hvis du lige gider manchette mig. Det er svært med det.
Du også.
Siger du lige filmer rundt her, for at seerne kan se Hornsilo. Det var noget af det helt gamle Paris, det der. Jeg tror, jeg kan høre nogen.
Hvor er vi på vej hen, Toge?
Vi er bare op for at høre, hvad der sker her på det her plateau. Jeg kan næsten allerede høre det.
Can you hear me at the back, outside? Outside, can you hear me? I don't think so. 1, 2, can you hear me? Can you hear or not? Is this a tiny bit? 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. Sound check. Can you? Is it okay now?
Yeah.
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So hello and welcome to Shakespeare Company, everybody. I'm thrilled to welcome this evening the great Shakespeare critic James Shapiro. I study him a lot, so I'm particularly thrilled to have him here tonight. Professor James Shapiro teaches at Columbia University in New York, and is the author of Rival Playwrights, Shakespeare and the Jews, I'm trying to get this right, Ober Ammergau, the troubling story of the world's most famous passion play, and of course 1599, a year in the life of William Shakespeare, which won the BBC4 Samuel Johnson Prize in 2006, and there was a bestseller in this bookshop and in many other bookshops. In his most recent book, Contested Will, subtitled Who Wrote Shakespeare, James Shapiro explores the famous authorship controversy and explains why and when so many people began to question whether Shakespeare wrote the plays and poems we know. Among them such intellectuals as Sigmund Freud, Henry James, and Mark Twain. Just like 1599, Contested Will contains many different books in one. It's a great piece of cultural history on literature and autobiography. It weaves together elegantly an impressive number of facts on Shakespeare and his times, and it is also full of stories and unusual anecdotes on the different writers who have devoted time and sometimes their lives to the question of the Shakespeare authorship. Just like other great books on Shakespeare, I'm thinking of Jonathan Bates' The Genius of Shakespeare. Contested Will is erudite and precise, but at the same time beautifully written and a great pleasure to read. So please welcome James Shapiro.
Can you hear me okay in the back? Does it sound good?
Can you hear it?
Perfect.
Yeah.
It's a huge honor and pleasure. I get to speak in a lot of places, but not a place that has so much history as this bookshop, both pre and post-war. So I'm just very moved to be here today, and I'm grateful on this beautiful day that you're all coming inside to hear me. I'm going to speak for 32 minutes, and then I'm going to stop. And I'm then going to turn the floor over to you. And I have only 2 requests at that time. One, that your question is a question rather than a statement. And the other is that you let me repeat the question so that we don't pass around mics and have to wait. We have much more informal conversation. I'll repeat your question so those outside can hear. And that's the way we'll do it. It's not easy keeping track of all the candidates who have been promoted as the true author of Shakespeare's plays and poems. The leading contenders nowadays, for those of you who follow this, are the Earl of Oxford, Francis Bacon, Christopher Marlowe, Mary Sidney, the Earl of Derby, the Earl of Rutland. There are others, and if I've offended anybody who has a particular candidate whose name I've not mentioned, I'll be glad to mention it afterwards for you. There are about 50 other candidates as well, working alone or collaboratively. A complete list is pointless, since by the time I'm finished here tonight, a newspaper somewhere in the world will announce yet another candidate for the authorship of the plays. Over time, and for all sorts of reasons, leading artists and intellectuals from all walks of life have joined the ranks of the skeptics.
If you talk a little loud,
Sure.
both of you.
Yeah. Happy to speak loud.
You're happy to speak loud?
Yes.
And we've just heard you speak loud
Oh, I had a microphone in there.
as well. How is it? Have you any special connection to the
Shakespeare Company is one of the great bookstores in the English-speaking world, and it has a famous history. It has a couple of incarnations. First, before the war, the Nazis shut the first bookstore down, and then after the war. So every great writer in the 20th century passed through this store. And not only their generosity to young people, allowing them to live and work in the store, but if you got a sense of the graciousness and the generosity of the staff, the intensity of the crowd there, just you physically feel as a writer. I'm in bookstores wherever I go. It's not too strong to say there's a kind of holy or religious quality to that bookstore. If bookstores can be a site of spirituality, that is certainly one.
They can be in a way, I think. They can be in a way.
The exceptional one. Many are antiseptic, but this one is not. And it's like being in any great space, a sports stadium with history, an opera house and the rest. This was special for me.
Do you know anything about the history else? You know, I know particularly that the Beat generation have been here a
Beat
lot.
all came through.
Hemingway.
Even before then, the great writers, American writers in the 20s and 30s came through. Joyce's works were made available to the world through this store, through Sylvia Beach, who was the great founder of Shakespeare and Company. So it's not simply a bookstore, it's Mecca for those who care about literature. And it's, of course, remarkable that it's in Paris, but it's a Mecca for English and American writers.
Yeah, so it's kind of a City Light bookstore, San Francisco.
It is. City Lights, but it's funny you say that. City Light has the same feel, of course, really identified with the Beats. This has a longer, more cosmopolitan history.
Exactly.
Nazi troops didn't shut down City Lights because they wouldn't sell an officer a copy of Finnegan's Wake. That's the story that's told.
It is.
About why the first Sylvia Beach's store was shut down.
Why Finnegan's Wake?
Somebody asked for a copy of Finnegan's Wake, a German officer, and they wouldn't sell it to him for whatever reason. That's the story.
Because it was holy, or because
it may be a myth, it may be true, I don't know.
That's it, but it's exciting.
It's a good story.
I love Finnegan's Wake, so it's
it's perfect.
Perfect.
Maybe somebody was offended by the very thought of it. Clearly.
I'm sorry to break it off, but the park is about to close.
Yeah.
So I suggest we go. I suggest we go to the bench that's over
outside
in front,
the store.
outside of the store.
Good. Let's do it.
Let's do that.
Thank you for meeting me.
You're not happy.
And nothing. I just thought about maybe Anton, you want to ask something about.
I had a question. I was lucky enough to get to pose a question in there about the use of autobiographical elements when interpreting an author's work. I thought that was a great discussion. Something else that got me to think about was whether there are other authors that have been desecrated or undone, unraveled by their legacy or their lives.
Yeah, you know, you raised in your question a much larger question that I could not answer there, which is the relationship between the life and the work.
Exactly.
You could take a British writer like Philip Larkin, who is a wonderful poet and writes very, very powerful poems, but he wasn't a nice human being. He was misogynist. He was racist. He was ugly in his views, but he also wrote great poetry. So does that devalue? We're talking about valuing or devaluing. And it's a vexed question because once you know what somebody thinks as a writer, it can't help but influence how you read the work. And Ezra Pound is another example, who is an extraordinary poet, but sided with the fascists during the war, was imprisoned afterwards briefly for that. So does that affect how we read his work? And how do you pry apart the life and the work? All I can say is for me, it's on a case-by-case basis. And there are authors we love because we love their personalities to the extent that we know their personalities. But your question really pointed right to that huge challenge.
Well, it's because we're very interested about it in Denmark at the moment, because we've had quite some time a huge discussion about our greatest author, the philosopher Kierkegaard, and it's tragic because today the discussion around him is no longer about his work. The discussion is about his life,
Right.
and it's a terrible deviation. Now Kierkegaard, he was religious, as we all know, and our discussion has gone to the level where someone must have written the works that he worshipped. I don't know if you are religious, but
You know, the Kierkegaard question, like a lot of great philosophers, it's not just Kierkegaard who's being challenged in that way. Brilliant philosopher, and those questions about his faith and religious views and how they inflected his work. The same questions are being asked in 20th century German philosophers or almost anybody writing today, American analytic philosophers. So it's probably even worse in philosophy than it is in literature. That is to say, it's very hard to separate somebody's thought from somebody's practice in their daily lives. So I think this is happening across the board, and as we get more and more obsessed with personalities, it makes it hard to take the work as seriously as we might.
Right.
And it's also really easier to say, was Kierkegaard a religious fanatic? Is that why he writes this or that? Should we disregard some of his ideas because of that? Rather than wrestling with the very difficult philosophical problems that he poses.
right. How should contemporary authors defend themselves against this? I mean,
I don't think you can.
we'll be writing something today, and 100 years from now, someone will be trying to interpret our lives. What would you have liked Shakespeare to do for you to more understand it? What would you have liked him to leave you?
You know, my answer to that is there are questions that I don't think about when I think about Shakespeare. I don't think about, was he a good father or a good husband? I think, was he a great writer and a profound thinker? And I think once you begin to ask questions that to me are less interesting questions, you arrive at a less interesting relationship to the work.
It's
I'm
interesting.
tired, guys.
Yeah.
That's it for me.
I understand that.
All right. Take care. Good questions, even this one. Take care. Bye-bye.
Det synes jeg var spændende. En stor mand.
Er du ude på at stjæle vores dokumentar?
Jeg tror det gik op for ham midt i interviewet, at han var ved at blive stillet spørgsmål af en fyr i klædt fjerboer. Det var der, han begyndte at tvivle på sin egen professionalisme.
Vi er golfjournalister, for fanden. Vi har 4 boer på, selvfølgelig har vi det.
Ja, altså. Men det var så, kan jeg sige til jer kasserer, det var James Shapiro, som vi lige fik talt lidt med og fik stillet spørgsmål. Even indført og medført fjerboer.
Jeg vil ikke sætte mig ved siden af mig.
Ja, nu sætter jeg mig i kraft af toget.
Jeg kan være en farlig mand.
Det er mig, der filmer lige nu.
Vi har lige været til oplæsning her i City Lights Bookstore i San Francisco. Og nej, sluderoprøv. Shakespeare & Company her in Paris.
Gud, ja.
I Paris. Som verdensmand kan jeg godt blive forvirret.
Det er jetlagget, der gør det.
Det er jetlagget. Jeg rejser frem og tilbage fra den ene hjørne til den anden. Det er Anton.
Straight from San Francisco.
Straight from San Francisco.
Kan I fortælle lidt om det foredrag, vi lige har hørt?
Der tror jeg, at du skal fortælle lidt, Anton, fordi der tror jeg, du er mere student til kosen, end jeg er.
Det er sandt. Foredraget forklarede os, hvordan vi ikke kan stole på nogen, end ikke konspirationsteoretikere. Det var jeg lidt ked af at få at vide, fordi jeg holder mig meget til konspirationsteorier. Jeg ved ikke, hvordan du har det med det.
Jeg elsker konspirationsteorier. Og jeg tror også, at ret mange af dem er sande.
Ja, men det er de ikke, har jeg lige fået at vide.
Har I selv lavet nogle konspirationsteorier på det sidste?
Pelle ringede lige før.
Nå, okay, så skal vi lige høre den historie. Så.
Ja. Og
Pelle
ringede og sagde, at vi skulle ikke stole på folk, og sagde, at man ikke skulle stole på konspirationsteoretikere. Så jeg tror, der er nogen, der konspirerer imod os.
Mod os?
Det er sgu også lidt underligt med de penge, fordi vi havde mange penge, da vi tog afsted.
Ja.
Og nu er vi stort set... vi har ikke så mange penge tilbage.
Det er smuldret.
Hvor er pengene?
Det er sådan noget af det, jeg tænker på. Måske det Mads, der konspirerer, eller det Shakespeare ham selv.
Nej, jeg bliver nødt til at krybe til korset. Mens I var inde og hørte det foredrag der, ikke?
Skrev du Hamlet?
Nej, så var jeg over at drikke en øl.
Så du har ikke været til...
Jeg sparede ikke på pengene. Jeg gik over og drak en øl over på...
Du er
på
så
café.
pisse studentikos, Mads.
Var du over på Studentercaféen imens vi
Jeg var over på
andre-
Studentercaféen, den med fontænerne.
Og nu går jeg også derover, så
Okay. Ses derovre.
fandme tavligt af ham.
Shake house there.
Ja, spækken.
Det er
Buksedragt. Du ved, hvordan de svinger.
det er lidt svært, fordi jeg føler mig udenfor, fordi jeg er fuldere end de andre. Og de vil ikke rigtig lade mig være med i deres show. Men vi er, ja. Der bliver ikke noget jazz i aften, men jeg lover mange gange, jeg synger en sang senere. Nej, jeg ved, hvad vi gør. Vi skal opføre Richard den 3. Fordi vi har været til Shakespeare-foredrag. Vi skal opføre Richard den 3. og jeg skal være Richard.
Hvem skal vi så være?
Toge, du skal være alle de andre.
Hvad holder du kameraet?
Så skal jeg nok tage mig af det tekniske og publikum.
Kan du
Jeg laver
citere os?
crowd control.
Er det det er du glad for?
Det bliver godt. Richard den 3. i aften.
Det smagte godt.
Hey Anton og Toge.
Ja.
Hvad sker der nu?
Nu er vi på vej over for at
Spise lidt. Vi er på Rue de la Huchette.
det er en klassisk turistfællegade, som vi desværre er tvunget til at gå på,
Den er svær.
fordi det er den hurtigste måde at komme derhen, hvor vi
Men
skal.
det er ikke kun turister, der bliver fanget her. Vi bliver fanget her, og politiet bliver også fanget.
Her har vi politiet.
Men vi skal have noget at spise. Og
Vi
Mads.
skal aldrig gå på den her gade igen. Der sidder en derinde og synger.
Ja.
Jeg har set hende sidde og synge.
Wow,